Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, you have 15 minutes.
Yeah. Can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yes, you can see your screen.
Awesome. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Ayada and I'm excited to join the Ride the Dogs Kia 2025. I believe our documentation should read like a dialogue and not a duty. So today I'm going to take us through a journey on how we can make our documentation not just helpful but truly captivating. Right. So what are the things that we want to look at? So this is broken into four parts. Part one is how do we make our documentation through storytelling? How do we make it more engaging? How can we sustain a data documentation culture within our organization or our business? How can we leverage analytics to improve our documentation? And then how can we streamline our documentation with automating? So, but before we do all of that, a brief about me. I do that stuff at Bridge LLC. Bridge LLC is a data consulting company based in Seattle, US. And I'm also the founder of Behind the Data. Basically, what we do at Behind the Data is um, we have the newsletter wing where we publish stories of experts. We have the consulting part where we do data stuff for both big and large enterprise customers. And then we have the academy where we train folks in data analytics training, not just to improve their technical skill alone, but also their communication skill. So as a consultant, one of the most hilarious conversation I've ever had was with this particular team lead that I was trying to get some information about their data quality framework and whatnot, their documentation, data lineage, and all of that. And he told me that, oh, anything I need, I should ask him, that he knows it all. And unfortunately, he doesn't even have the right answer to some of the critical questions that I was asking. And these memes that we are looking at is how most of the organizations out there are, aside having documentation for data related projects, even for dashboards and whatnot, there is really no proper documentation, which means that when someone is leaving the organization, is either the project is at the end of the day gets abandoned, or somebody have to pick it up and start all over from scratch. And this is happening because documentation is not easy. It's not an easy task to build, and aside not being an easy task to build, is not rewarding. So nobody really gives them about the person that takes his or her time to sit down and come up with a detailed and engaging documentation. So let's look into the part one of this whole thing, right? So making data documentation engaging through storyline, right? I know that you probably want to set up an open source tool, or you've probably read about maybe when you join your company, you are trying to do onboarding and there are some softwares that you need to set up, and it looks like the documentation is like a puzzle rather than a guide, right? But I want to tell you that you are not alone, right? Many users, including myself, find traditional documentation really dry and hard to follow. A typical example was one of our current clients who were trying to set up DBT the way they put it in their documentation, right? And we're hitting a lot of problems, right? But unfortunately, some of their staffs also had that problem, but they didn't tell whoever was in charge. They just find solutions to fix the problem and they moved on, right? But we also had to like encounter that same problem, and that sort of delayed our onboarding process, right? But what if we could take all of these ASO out of the way and transform our documentation into something that is more engaging and more memorable? If I mentioned something in biology now, you probably think back to your secondary school days and remember vividly how your biology teacher was, drawing the eyes or drawing the skin or drawing the hearts on the chalkboard. Those are what we should look at making our documentations to sort of become. But how do we do this basically? So storytelling isn't just for novels or maybe movies or whatnot, right? Even as a data person or even as a technical writer or whatnot, you want to tell stories or your documentation in such a way that it is more relatable and easier to understand. That's why we have different platforms like uh, I think the next speaker coming after me is a technical writer, right? So you probably shed more light on that, right? So we want to make our technical content more relatable and easier for our upcoming or whoever is coming behind us, even for us ourselves, to be able to understand it and grab it. That's why when you're writing a piece of code, the last speaker before we went on break, I saw like how she was documenting everything she was working on, including comments on, hey, this is what this thing is doing. Give it 2 years to come, she probably might not remember what some of those things are if she did not put a comment to it. So that comment is some sort of documentation as well. But then, how can we make our documentation more easier for users to follow, right? So we know that story helps users to connect with the content on a personal level. That's why we have like myriad of content creators out there doing their things in their own way, right? That's why you are able to remember your favorite line in Spider-Man. That's why you're able to remember your favorite line in any movie that you've seen, that you find really, really interesting. Something speak to you about that particular scene that makes you feel connected to that particular aspect of the movie on a personal level. So we can make this, right, also come into our documentation and make our documentation more lively. So we can also make narrative to be more memorable, basically. So instead of saying I have two different documentation that I want us to compare. One is coming from Maven. The other one is coming from a weather API platform. Now, for Maven, they said, "Oh, become a good citizen by first signing up and opening an account." The other website is saying you can pull data from our API for the past 3 days, 7 days, 9 days, and whatnot, right? And then for Maven, right, they have a wealth story that keep their user interested and invested, right? I want to actually become a good citizen, so I need to first go and create an account. But for this other platform, right, they didn't even talk about, oh, you need to create accounts. They just say, oh, start pulling data. Then when you get to where you need to pull data, you find out that, oh, you need to actually create an account, right? So that is how you make your data or your documentation more relatable for whoever is coming on board or who you are looking up to. But how do we build a sustainable documentation culture, right? So as a consultant, like I mentioned earlier, you join organizations and you want to jump on a project and fix one or two things and then find your way. But in a scenario where a new team member joins your project, of course they have questions about the process, the tools, why are we doing this, what's the essence of even building this pipeline in the first place. Then the only thing that you can rely on is the documentation or some sort of information that somebody has built somewhere, but the documentation is outdated or is scattered, and most of the time is non-existent. So which means that you need to now start jumping on meetings that are not really necessary if documentations are actually in place. So how can we make this become a thing, right? Is that we involve team members in documentation. So there is this thing with, oh, it's only the data engineers that should write documentations about a pipeline, or it's only product owners that should write documentations about their product and whatnot. But if we make documentation a shared responsibility such that it's not only the technical writers that have the responsibility to write these things, but also everyone is involved, they can contribute their own insight into making the documentation more lively, right? We can also assign ownership, which means that we designate specific people, right, to different aspects of the documentation. So my team member one is to handle the landing page. Anytime there is a new update to the product, you go there and fix it up. It doesn't mean that you need to fix up every other part of the documentation, right? And this would basically help us to maintain accountability and regular updates on the documentation. Then we can also bring in onboarding contributions. There are platforms where you can come and write a guest post for them. There is Airbytes, there is, Rights to Dev, who paid for technical writers, and all of these platforms have organizations that are calling people in that, hey, we have this gap, right? So bring your expertise, write these things for us, make our documentation much more user relatable, so that we are able to look at the brighter future that we are hoping our product will scale to. So what are the other things that we can also look at? We can also regularly update and review our documentation. So which means that we can have schedule reviews. Schedule reviews could be, oh, we want to be updating this aspect of the documentation quarterly or maybe on a monthly basis. We want to have documentation sprints. Oh, when you're updating, update only the first 10 pages, right? In a quarter. Then the following quarter, update the next set 10 pages, right? And like that. And also we can integrate it into our workflow. So the last speaker showed something about AI agents, right? We can leverage AI agents in automatically updating our documentation, basically, right? So it can help us to include definitions of like maybe tasks that are done. How do you confirm whether you have this database set up properly? Use this credential, do this. Once you are done, ensure that you have this thing deleted from your staging environment, so that nobody is pulling what you are testing around into their own workflow, basically, right? Then to make this actually work, we need to change the orientation of people about documentation. Like I mentioned earlier, documentation is hard work, and because it's hard work and nobody is praising anybody or giving some sort of recognition to it, that's why nobody wants to get involved in any documentation project. But then if we start doing public acknowledgement, right, we highlight contributions of, oh, this person did this in this aspect of the documentation, so kudos to you for doing this. That way we are brewing the spirit of documentation development culture, or basically, as I would love to call it. Then we can also offer incentives, like, or maybe a small reward, like, hey, because you did this today, you have this coupon code that you can go and use on the company's or the department's account and whatnot. Then we can also bring in some sort of gamifications, maybe something like, oh, documentation champion of the month, best error spotter of the month, things like that, that would help that documentation not only become things that new folks or even existing members are referencing, but also be on a scale, on a quality scale, that any product that whether the department or the unit are sending out, that documentation is also at that level, right? Then how do we leverage analytics to improve documentation? Most of the time it's usually a particular page that people are struggling with, and then they bounce out. As a data person, most of the time when we are working, we always want to look at what's the best flow that we can use to set up a good data infrastructure for maybe a startup that won't cost them much. So most of the time we look to open source, but there is this particular open source, I mean, they have a good product, but their documentation is a mess, which means that to set it up is a lot of headache, and at the end of the day, most of the time we end up just leaving it and going for another product. So for them, what they could do is look into that particular page where people are actually are just bouncing out and all of that. And how can we really look at this? Analytics can help us to provide a window into how our users are interacting with the documentation, and this will help us to inform where we can come in and improve their experience. So what are the key metrics that we need to look at when we want to bring in analytics to improve our documentation? That will be the page views. So we have 10 pages. Out of all of these 10 pages, each one of them, how many views do we get on a weekly basis? What are the time spent on each page? What is the bounce rate? Bounce rate is, oh, I'm on this page, I spend 3 seconds and I'm out, off to another page, basically. Your landing page could have a lot of bounce rates because it's like the entry page, right? So if there is really no information that would require somebody to spend more time on it, that's fine. Another thing that we could also look into is the search query. What are people searching for? Now, if you go to any website and you click on their documentations, maybe a data warehouse, and you click on their documentation, there is a search button that you can use to search for things, right? You can have all of these things captured. What are people usually searching for? Now, these things that people are searching for, when we look at their pages, are people really staying on these pages, or they get there and they don't find what they want and then they bounce off, right? Now, last part of the four parts is streamlining documentation with automation, right? And what does this mean? This means that we have tools like DBT, like GitHub, that we can use for automating our documentation updates, right? This will help us to reduce manual errors and sort of save time. So which means that for every person that is involved in documentation updates, they have their their parts on their end. All they do is do the updates, push it to GitHub. Sometimes we set up CI/CD to ensure that what they are sending actually conform with the standard that we have set up. And yeah, that's more like how you make your user go from oh, this is how this thing is. I think I can quickly share this slide. I said this slide, this website. So this are the documentation website I was talking about, right? Here we can see this is from Marvel, right? And then on getting there, they are already making it sound exciting, right? Hey, welcome to the world greatest comics API, right? Be a good citizen. So before I can do anything, here is the short version of what you need to do. This is all the thing that I need to do, right? Sign up. After signing up, I need to read their term of usage, so I know how I can use the API that I'm signing up for, link bank and whatnot. But then when we go to the other side, right, this is what I have here. This is just saying, please sign up to use our fast and easy to work weather APIs, right? Then I have a bunch of information that is already throwing me off my feet because I don't know which one should I even go into, which one should I pick. I mean, too many information. Both of them are offering the same thing, same API service and whatnot, but one is making it more relatable for me to read, and that way I'm able to navigate my way around here without having to maybe go back to Google and start searching for how do I use this weather API, or start searching for a YouTube tutorial, right? So for this, because I've used it a couple of times, so I can easily find my way around it. But for a new user, this become way too much, overwhelming, too many informations. I have this on this side telling me to subscribe. I have this on this side, which I don't know whether it is free or not. You see? So these are the things that we need to take out of our documentation process and bring in storytelling like Marvel have done, so that our users can engage and enjoy the information that we are providing for them. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for having me. If there is any question, please ask your question, and you can scan the barcode to join the End Data newsletter, and follow me on LinkedIn. My name is Ayade Adegbite. Once again, thank you for having me. Over to you, Kelvin.
Okay. Can you hear me now, Ayo?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, sorry about that. We were saying we appreciate it. Let's appreciate Ayo so that you guys have it. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
There's the team, you can see. And yeah. So any question for Ayo before we let him off the hook? He has been on Zoom for the longest time. You know, the Zoom fatigue, right? He's been waiting for this session for the longest time. Yes. You all know my neck on WhatsApp. Am I going to be presenting or not? I'm so happy you're able to present. It's really appreciative for also taking time to be with us. You have a question before? Oh, okay. So we're going to be having Suda coming in. He's presenting physically, but please don't jump off too fast. We still have you, and we still have the session going on here. But thank you so much.
Thank
Let's
you.
appreciate the awesome.
Thank you for having me. Bye, guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.